What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host that's very satisfied with his new Hawaiian shirt purchase, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/StoriesAboutKevin.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.
Alrighty, this story's called, "This Kevin left crap stains on my carpet and tried to blame my dog." This is my first post here. This is how I interpreted a Kevin, but this is all stuff my best friend of 6 years genuinely did. I know a few more Kevins within my life, so if this post is received well, I'll open up about those too, as well as more stories from this Kevin. This Kevin was my best friend for 6 years before I had enough and decided to move on from him. We should probably start in high school, as this is where I met him. To start with, he wasn't as bad, and I just thought he didn't really care. But as I learned more about him, I figured out he was a Kevin. In high school, we had a math teacher, and he had a very uncommon name. Uncommon to us Brits anyway, as he was from Zimbabwe. Kevin thought it would be a bright idea to make a fake Facebook account and message people really stupid stuff on it and pretend it was from him. But at the same time, he went around bragging about how he made it and even said in one of the messages to me that he had made it. Now, when the school found out, he was surprised and even tried to blame others, including me, for this blatant idiocy. I spent most of my time in the first years of high school in my head of year's office, because he would make really stupid videos that had teachers in them and then he'd upload them to his YouTube channel, which our head of year had a note saying it belonged to him. When he'd make them, I'd get called down and asked why he made them, all because he mentioned my name in one of them. He wouldn't stop, but we were allowed some salvation when he broke his laptop and couldn't make them anymore. Even the way his laptop got broken showed what a Kevin he is. Because one day I was at his house and he had tried to say that him breaking his laptop was an accident because he stood on it. This turned out to be complete BS when he asked to borrow his sister's laptop and she said, "You shouldn't have punched yours." He punched the screen on his laptop till it broke because it was running too slow. I figured he'd probably grow out of it, and for a while he did. But towards the end of high school, things just got worse. Me and him started dating these two best friends, and both relationships did eventually end. But the way he went about certain things in his relationship showed what a Kevin he was. They were very on-off in their relationship. I think they broke up and got back together on like 20 plus separate occasions. It was pretty ridiculous to the point it became a bit of a daily joke. Will Kevin and his girlfriend break up today? Find out next! It was absurd. On one of these times, it was an argument because he had apparently hit her. I didn't think he was capable of it, but I'd done some digging and found out that she was on top of him and squeezing his blackheads because he asked her to, and then one was particularly painful and he slapped her and called her a cooter. He claims it was an accident, but how do you accidentally hit someone and use that foul a word? He was always particularly violent, a case of this being when she had broken up with him and got with another guy, and he full-on assaults the guy she's with. In high school, we used to hang out in the media room at lunch because we were the nerds, and on one lunchtime, Kevin didn't show up because she was there, and he couldn't just be grown up around her. Around 20 minutes of lunch passes, and then suddenly, the door slams open. It's Kevin. Kevin is a big dude, very heavily built, and he always has been, and for some reason, decided to do a full-on super kick on this dude, and in doing so, split his trousers open. As this is in the UK, we had to wear uniforms for school, and by the end of high school, this Kevin had managed to rip several pairs of trousers, rip the pocket off his blazer, rip one of the sleeves off his blazer, and rip one of his shirts in half. What made the incident with his trousers worse, he tried to blame the other guy for splitting his trousers. He also ripped the pocket off his blazer because he was walking up the stairs to English one time. His pocket hooked onto one of the stair railings. Instead of unhooking it and continuing like a normal person, Kevin just powered forward, pulling with all his power and completely ripped the pocket off his blazer. Anyway, he wasn't just a complete moron in school. He was also pretty stupid outside of school. I remember one day he woke me up at like 9:30 a.m. and said he wanted to go for a walk. I was kinda like, "You're waking me up early to go for a walk? What are you, a dog?" and he took it way too personally. So I agreed to go on the stupid walk with him, and for some reason, he took me past my ex's house. I asked where we were going, and he just said, "Trust me," and I did. So we go to this Tesco, a UK supermarket, and he just walks in and then walks out again without buying anything. I questioned him, and he just said, "Trust me," again, so I follow him for miles, and I find myself at a local housing estate. So I look over his phone to see what he's looking at, and it was his ex's profile on Snapchat. He had been following her every move, trying to find her. This was the same girl he slapped too. So I questioned him, like, "Why are you going after her?" He again just said, "Trust me." I was pretty annoyed at this point, and he was like, "That's them." And it was. I kept my distance because my ex was with them, and just being around her makes me want to vomit violently. A story for another day. As we know from before, Kevin is quite violent. So he wandered in, and there were 3 guys there ready to fight him. He was going to take on 3 guys in a street fight, and I know these guys, and they have no morals. They would have used every trick in the book to get the upper hand on him. He went down the street and didn't come back for half an hour. When he did, he was across the street and started hitting brick walls. I was like, "What are you doing?" Then he tells me to go home. He dragged me out, dragged me along, and then told me to leave. Honestly, I feel like a bit of a Kevin after that. I then go home, and I was pretty pissed off with him. He returns like 3 hours later, and at this point, I'd already packed up all of his stuff. He used to bring like half of his house whenever he stayed around mine. Then he walks in like nothing had happened. Walks into my room and is like, "Hey," sits down and goes to play his PlayStation to see it's packed up. He asked why, and I told him that it's time for him to leave. He then got really mad at me and tried to make it out that it was my fault. I was like, "Yes, Kevin, because it's my fault you went out and stalked your ex all day and then vanished for 3 hours. I found out where he was in those 3 hours, and he was at the house of my ex's new, at the time, boyfriend in an attempt to wiggle his way back in, so he could get closer to her. He used to sit there and complain about this same dude to me. I asked him to leave, and then he didn't speak to me for ages because it was my fault for pissing him off. I just shrugged it off and waited for him to come back, to which he eventually did. The final nail in the coffin between him and his ex was New Year's Day 2018. She'd recently moved to a town which was about 9 miles from where we lived, and he was back with her for the final time. Kevin knew that her parents didn't want her to have sex till she was of age. Kevin was of age as he was a year older. They'd done it loads of times without her parents finding out, until that day. Kevin had taken a photograph of scratch marks on her phone to show her. That day, she had her phone taken from her by her mom because the 2 of them didn't clean up the kitchen after using it. He was then asked to leave their house and never returned because the mother found the scratch mark photos. This angered him to the point he was refusing to leave and only did because they threatened him with the police. He had no money to get home, and his mother, who was also a bit of a Kevin, refused to come and pick him up. He had to walk 9 miles. He made it about 2 miles and gave up and called me. He hadn't spoken to me for a couple of months, so I was shocked. When I answered, he was complaining to me, so I asked him what was I supposed to do about it. I figured out a solution, and I got him a taxi to my house where I then paid for it. His mom then came and got him from my house, despite the fact that I lived 3 miles away. She was willing to pick him up 3 miles away, but not 9, despite the 3-mile route costing her £25 in taxi fees. Okay, Mother Kevin, whatever works for you. She paid me back like 2 weeks later, and that was the end of that. He was nearly put onto a sex offenders register because she was underage and kept trying to defend himself to everyone, despite literally doing things with a girl who was not of age. It was quite strange that he didn't have money on that day, as money was one of the main tools he used to win everyone over. He probably had a higher number of pounds in his wallet than brain cells in his brain. On Kevin's 18th birthday, he decided he wanted to go clubbing at 8 p.m. Most nightclubs don't open until 9 to 11 p.m., and most don't get busy till 1 a.m., as this was when the last pubs will be shut by. I'd never been clubbing before, so I did the smart thing and asked some advice from a friend of mine who is an avid clubber. Kevin, however, just went in blind and wondered why he was disappointed. His goal was to pull. If you aren't from England, this means to get laid, basically. Bear in mind, this is a guy who is quite nerdy, has poor personal hygiene, and isn't desirable to women as he doesn't look after his health and is just generally quite depressing to talk to. We went at the opening time, and he was quite shocked that nobody was there. I knew this would happen, but after trying to explain to Kevin, he wasn't having any of it. We went back to the pub. We started at until around 11 p.m. We then left and we were going back to the nightclub. We saw 3 girls on the way and he was like, "They're fit." I said, "Let's talk to them." And he was like, "Nah, CBA." For one, he uses abbreviations when talking. CBA equals can't be arsed. But he also expected to pool without actually trying to talk to women. I don't know what kind of Jedi mind tricks he's got, but they evidently didn't work as the only thing he was pulling that night was his own Richard when he got home. So anyway, after I talked to them, he just kind of awkwardly tagged along and said the occasional thing, but overall had no interest despite calling them fit earlier. The night continued and we tagged along with them to a bar where Kevin didn't have anything to drink, despite them literally offering to buy him one. He just awkwardly stared at one of them the entire time. I was talking to them and getting to know them. We then decided to go to a nightclub and the time was about 1 a.m., the normal time to go to one, and they needed to pee before we went. The 3 girls went to the toilet and he turns to me like, "That one girl is wife material." He'd known her for 5 minutes and said like 3 words to her. Once they got back, he then said, "I need a crap," and went to the toilet for about 20 minutes. He would often do this, which made me wonder what he actually did in there. During this time, they asked me why he was acting so strangely, and I just told them he was kinda shy and had to lie for him. We went to the nightclub, and then the girls we met found some of their friends and went off with them for most of the night. Not before getting like 15 pounds worth of drinks out of Kevin. Now Kevin had what he wanted. He had some beautiful girls on the line. We were at a busy club. The night was still young. It was all going to plan. Kevin stood on the dance floor for an hour and didn't even dance. Not even a shuffle. He stood there with a pint of dark fruits in his hand and didn't say a word. I was off dancing with some random people, the normal nightclub behavior. He then grabs me and is like, "Can we go outside?" So I do, and he's like, "I don't know where that girl from before went." Basically, he'd been completely mugged off. They got the drinks out of him and then ditched him, and he spent a full hour looking for them. They were still in the club because I'd spoken to them within that hour. We then went in for 10 more minutes and he was like, "We're going home." So walking home, he says to me, "I'm never going to a nightclub again." And instead of walking home, which was less than a mile away, he hailed a taxi and spent like 7 pounds to get home. The night was a disaster, and this was towards the end of the 6 years of friendship between me and Kevin. Alrighty guys, I know what you're wondering. Hey man, that title's misleading. And I thought the same thing, so I decided to do some snooping and pooping. Not the latter, I was just rhyming. But anyways, so it turns out the top comment on this post is actually a comment from the OP. And it says, "I realize the title may be misleading as I forgot to add in that story. Basically what happened there is, he used to sleep on my floor with a blanket and a pillow, despite me having a sofa he could have slept on. One day, I moved his blanket to discover a crap stain. I asked, what the heck, as you would in that situation, and he was like, "Yeah, I saw your dog in here earlier. He was wiping his ass on the carpet." My dog hadn't been in my room that day, and how would he wipe his butt on that bit of the carpet if a blanket had been covering it? Oh, and then there's a reply that says, "Good thing you didn't sleep on your sofa." Anyways, that's funny. How does that happen though? Did he just not wipe well earlier and was starting to feel itchy and decided to on the carpet in order to scratch that itch? And panic lied that the dog did it? Either way, well, I feel like that would have been a good point to stop that friendship, but that's just my point of view. And also, what was this thing about him being on the sex offenders list thing? He was just a year older than the girl. Is it like that strict there that like if you've had a girlfriend since before you were 18 and then you turn 18 before she turns 18, she's like 17, are you guys not allowed to do stuff? That's just weird because in Texas, if you're 17, you can be with anyone that's like within 4 years older than you. So you can be with a 21-year-old, I believe. But that's kind of pushing it in my eyes. But 17 and 18-year-olds, come on, well, that's stupid. However, what else is stupid is Kevin. Holy cow, alright? Just because I defended one of his things does not mean that he's free of any sort of blame. People, heads up, if someone likes to punch things out of anger, I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but it's likely it will graduate from inanimate objects to you if you're the object of his frustration. And also, if he hits you at all, no matter if it's just a slap, if it's done out of anger, it will escalate. And unless they actively work on getting help with these issues, then I recommend not sticking around, just saying, man. This story's called, I'm gonna disinfect my clothes to not catch the corona. Not about me, but about my uncle. A little backstory. My uncle, my mom's brother, is not the smartest man, but I wouldn't consider him dumb either. He has his moments, I guess. However, he did not go to college or anything, and in the past few years, after retiring, I think he has way too much time on his hands. He spends his days watching TV, driving around, or scrolling through Facebook, and he believes in sorts of fake news and miracle cures, BS, you know what I mean. Another thing I should add is that he can be a bit of a hypochondriac, leading him to act crazy and borderline paranoid in extreme cases. Obviously, one of the latest problems is that he has a lot of wrong info on corona. For example, on how it's transmitted. So he does a lot of stuff that help absolutely nothing. Yesterday morning, he went to the supermarket, and when he got home, he decided to, instead of taking a shower like a normal person, disinfect himself. How? By pouring alcohol, as in rubbing alcohol at 96%, over his clothes, because the clothes could have corona. Now, after his hands were wet with the alcohol, he dropped the bottle in his lap, yes, all over the crotch area, and decided the clothes will just absorb it and it'll be fine. So instead of changing, he just kept them on until bedtime. This happened around 11 a.m. By bedtime, his thing was starting to hurt, so he changed, and to no one's surprise, he had a first-degree burn on it, like all swollen, burning red, leaking pus bad. His solution now is to just drown it in cold water, oh no, and hope it gets better, as he is afraid of going to the hospital and getting corona, or going to the pharmacy and actually having to show it to anyone. And no, putting an anti-burn or hydration cream on it did not cross his mind. So yeah, I come from a family of idiots. Oh dear, great giant flying spaghetti monster, what have we done to deserve such idiocy amongst us? This kind of reminds me from a death on 1,000 Ways to Die. Is that show on Spike? I don't know, I haven't watched cable in years. Anyways, this show, in case you don't know, basically just shows a bunch of interesting ways you could die and interesting ways people have died. And they show reenactments or dramatizations or whatever the hell they're called. But anyways, there was this guy, and this homeless man made physical contact with him, and this guy was a full-on germaphobe. So of course, in his mind, homeless means dirty and disgusting. So what he does is he fills his bath with rubbing alcohol, and he decides to take a dip in it. Now, in case you don't know, alcohol can and will be absorbed through your skin if you take a bath in it. So as you might expect, he got insanely drunk and then eventually died of alcohol poisoning, because that is exactly what'll happen if you take a bath in rubbing alcohol.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.